President George W. Bush doesn't give many interviews anymore, but because of his special relationship to Chancellor Angela Merkel, he invited us to his summer home in Maine. We talked about the past and the future of the transatlantic relationships, Angela Merkel's take on China, on Russia. He also explained how he felt when he was rubbing her shoulders. President Bush, you have met Chancellor Angela Merkel so many times. Do you recall kind of a defining moment?
You know, the last time I saw her was defining because she flew all the way over to my dad's funeral. And we were at the Blair House, which is right across the street from the White House. My whole family was there. And somebody said, Angela Merkel would like to call on you, and it just meant a lot. You know, I was very close to my dad, and the fact that she would take time to come really defined, I think, our relationship. She's a very thoughtful, kind person, and I think another time was at the ranch. We've got a ranch we love in Central Texas, and she and Professor Sauer came to visit Laura and me, and I remember she and I walked across our prairie. We went for probably an hour walk or so, just visiting about a variety of things. And it was an opportunity not to conduct diplomacy, but an opportunity to get to know her, get to know each other better. And that was a kind of a defining moment too.
You painted a portrait of her. I'm sure all that kind of is seen in this portrait. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the process and the picture itself.
Sure, well, you know, I was a new painter, so I was a little worried about making sure I captured the person that I was trying to paint. And in Angela's case, I wanted to paint a kind person with a lovely soul. And that's the person I got to know. I mean, she's plenty tough in order to survive in what was a man's world, German politics, for a long time. She's got to be pretty tough. And she's resolute. But I also saw a side of her that was very compassionate and decent. And that's what I try to do in the portrait. I hope she likes it. In other words, you can tell the people I had great respect for and liked, and some of them, yeah, I wasn't too close to when you look at the portraits I painted. And hers is one on the plus side. I liked her a lot.
Talking about more complicated relationships, the relationship with Gerhard Schröder, that's her predecessor, at the end was a little bit icy.
Very icy, yeah.
Which role did your personal relationship with Angela Merkel play for the improvement of the transatlantic relationship?
Well, I think, I mean, Gerhard Schröder used me as a political pawn on his re-election, and it became very personal. And people in his cabinet said some things that they shouldn't have said. I think one of them compared me to Adolf Hitler or something like that. And, you know, to have policy disagreements is one thing, but to personalize it in a way that, to help oneself politically really was, you know, I didn't think very good. Didn't represent a good friendship. Angela came in and changed that completely. We had our disagreements, of course. I mean,
what was your biggest disagreement with her?
You know, probably whether or not Georgia should be given the membership application process to NATO. And she was very resolute and didn't think it was the right thing to do. And I thought it was the right thing to do, but we conducted ourselves in such a way as not to personalize it, because above all the politics, there was just friendship. And so she, you know, whether or not she intentionally tried to repair relationships with me, I don't even know if the relationship needed to be repaired. I guess she saw what Schröder did, but anyway, it was a different relationship and much more positive and constructive.
What about Guantanamo Bay? That was also a huge disagreement, right? In your history?
Not really. I wasn't going to change. I mean, my attitude there is that if you're worried about Guantanamo Bay, go down there and inspect it, like the International Red Cross did on a regular basis. But I don't remember any friction over that.
Talking about difficult relationships, what triggered Angela Merkel in Donald Trump and caused these harsh reactions? He once refused shaking her hands.
I don't know. It's that was just not a good period in German or U.S. relations. And I don't know. I don't know Donald Trump. I met him one time at the very same funeral that Angela Merkel came to, and so it's hard for me to guess why. I mean, Germany is a very close ally and a very important friend. Germany is really important for Europe, and Germany's got a lot of sway in terms of helping shape kind of world opinion on key issues, and therefore it makes sense for a U.S. president to be close to the German chancellor. And even though Gerhard Schroeder and I had disagreements on issues, we nevertheless were able to send the signal that U.S.-German relations were very important.
How does this work, Mr. President? After you left office, do you stay in contact with chancellors or presidents from other countries? Did you talk to Angela Merkel after that, or? No,
not really. Look, I'm out, and I'm happy to be out. As you know, I've become a simple painter, and I'm out of politics. I kind of got into U.S. politics a little bit when I published a book on immigrants, one of whom was a great German named Dirk Nowitzki. We both share the same hometown now, Dallas, Texas. He's a remarkable guy, loyal, and community activist for children, and he's a good man. And anyway, we have an immigration debate going on in the United States now. I was unhappy with the tone of it, and I think if we start with the premise that we're all God's children and every life matters, then all of a sudden one has a different perspective on how to enforce the border and how to deal with people who are escaping tyranny. And anyway, but other than that, I'm pretty much out of politics.
Talking about immigration, that was something which will define probably Angela Merkel's chancellery. What's your take on her reaction when she didn't close the borders and let in like 1 million or so refugees?
Yeah, you know, my first reaction was there's a woman with a big heart. And I'm sure she was motivated by human compassion. And, you know, it was clearly a tough political decision for her. But she took a lead. Look, I made a lot of tough decisions too, and I hope when people look at my record as president, they say he did what he thought was right and stood his ground. And so I admire her steadfastness. Angela was not afraid to make a decision and was not afraid to lead. And the world needs leadership that has, based upon principle. And that's what she did. And I know it costs political points, but it seems like she's doing pretty well. Here's the thing that amazes me. 8 years in a democracy is a long time. I know full well. People get tired of you. And they were tired of Reagan after 8 years. They're darn sure tired of me after 8 years. And Angela Merkel has managed to survive in a pretty tough political environment for more than 8 years. And it's pretty amazing when you think about it. That, the tenure reflects something, and I think it reflects the German voters' trust. They may not agree with Angela, but they trust her, and they trust her first and foremost because she's a good person.
Did she, in your perspective, make any major mistakes?
You know, I'm not very close to German politics. Not really. You know, I mean, I'm sure as you, I hope her tenure is not defined by the decision on refugees.
What should her tenure be defined by, in your opinion? Mm-hmm.
I think it ought to be on bringing honor and principle leadership to the Chancellery of Germany. What people say, what's your greatest legacy? My greatest legacy was, you know, my girls loved me after being president. There's profound principles that are important with leaders, and leaders must set examples. I bet a legacy of Angela Merkel is there's a lot of girls who watch Angela Merkel say, I too can have a position of responsibility and power, because she conducted herself with such dignity. And you know, there's no such thing as accurate short-term history. In other words, Angela's place in history won't be known until other chancellors come, until events around the world unfold. And I think people are beginning to realize the premium on character when it comes to leadership. And the lack of character is very notable. People with character, it seems like people take that for granted, but nevertheless, in a period where character has been lacking, all of a sudden, people are going, wow, that's an important trait for a leader. And Angela Merkel's a leader. She's not a follower, which I admire a lot.
Is this changing, like in a world with Facebook, Twitter, social media, that like political leaders are more populists or better on Twitter than really like with their principles?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, I got out of there before all this stuff happened. And, you know, it probably would have made my time at Washington different. Although I can assure you I wouldn't have been on Twitter and I wouldn't have been on Facebook. But, yeah, I think populism, though, is a result of more than just social media platforms. I think populism reflects a frustration with society. In other words, here in the States, you know, I made a decision in 2008 to use taxpayers' money to bail out Wall Street to prevent a worldwide depression. And that made a lot of people mad, you know, really mad. I mean, the average guy out there where I was raised in Texas pays his mortgage, and all of a sudden George Bush uses his taxpayers' money to give it to Wall Street. And there's something unfair about that in their mind. And I wouldn't have done it had it not been necessary to save the economy, but you can't explain that to somebody. You know, you can't prove a negative. And so, and that created this anger. And then wages were stagnating, which created anger. Then, and then people felt, you know, immigration kind of began to crowd them out. So I think it's a multiple set of factors. What the mass media does, or the current media does, is enables them to talk among themselves. And the real danger is the conspiracy theories that arise. And it's going to require strong leaders to knock that down and to refute some of these ridiculous extremist ideologies on both the left and the right.
Are you glad that you were out of the White House before all that happened? Before Twitter took over, so to speak?
Yeah, I think well, yeah, I'm glad. Look, I'm glad I served 8 years. And it was a fabulous 8 years of my life. And I'm glad I'm out of the political maelstrom. You know what's weird about America right now? So I've established this friendship because I sit next to her at funerals with Michelle Obama. And one time I gave her a mint, an Altoid. And my daughter said to me, "You're trending." I don't know, okay, what is that? Is that good? No, you're on social media, you and Michelle Obama. And the country was shocked that a Republican male and a Democrat female could have some kind of bond other than, you know, debating politics. And it just goes to show how polarized things are now. The question, and I'm sure they are in Germany as well, and the question then is, will we be able to merge out of this? And my attitude is, so long as there's democracy, we can, because most Americans don't like the hostility in the political system. Most Americans are not populists, raging populists who express their anger through conspiracy theories. And elections will reflect that, so long as the elections are opened and people vote. And Germany's about to have a big election, and that's part of the healing process.
Coming back to Angela Merkel, Mr. President, so you were just out of office when Merkel was informed that her mobile phone was tapped by the NSA, and I quote her, she said, "Spying amongst friends is not at all okay." Do you understand that?
Oh, totally, yeah. I, of course, had no idea that we were spying on Angela Merkel. But yeah, I mean, that's not the definition of friendship, and she had every right to be straightforward in her criticism.
She is also seen as kind of a world leader who is taking climate change really seriously. Which role did she play in your life to make you understand, or actually on your take when it comes to the climate?
Well, I understood the issue. I just didn't want to have a global treaty that didn't include China and India. Otherwise, it was a waste of time. No, she was, I remember when I came with Schroeder was the chancellor, and I went to the Bundestag and sat down with all the leaders there, and the Green Party guy was, you know, giving me a lecture on that, and I said, fine, why don't you support me on civilian nuclear power? It's clean and it's renewable. I mean, it's the best thing you could do for the environment. After all, your neighbor in France has figured out a way to get rid of this waste, and all of a sudden, conversation went quiet. And you know, yeah, there's a lot of competing interests and a lot of different views, but no question, Angela was very strong on the environment, and I don't blame her. The other thing she was strong on, though, at the same time, the world seemed to be focused on the environment when people were dying of AIDS on the continent of Africa. And of course, I was concerned about having a agreement that worked, but on climate. But I was also deeply concerned about rich people standing by as people were needlessly dying. And as you may know, we put together a giant initiative during my administration, and Angela was very supportive. And as a result, millions now live who would have died. And anyway, setting priorities are important, but solving problems are very important too.
Some people criticize her over her politics with China, saying that the trade with this country is more important for her than human rights.
I don't know. I haven't followed that closely, but that, you know, that's going to be a dilemma for everybody, and China's certainly a problem for the Western world, because not only are they becoming an industrial competitor, but they are pretty autocratic. And you know, they got a guy who declared himself almost leader for life, and it's you know, it's just a different set of pressures on the Chinese leadership. And you know, the world has to figure out how they're going to deal with human rights abuses. I hope when people study my presidency, they'd say George Bush cared about human rights abuses. Every time I'd go to China, I'd talk about religious freedom. And I did so in a way as not to embarrass the Chinese leaders or anger them or create foment disorder. But I told them all the time, I said, look, it mattered to my life, and I think you'll find a society with religious people is going to be a society that's more compassionate. And they didn't want to hear it.
Angela Merkel's relationship with Vladimir Putin is somewhat special. Sometimes it's really close, sometimes it's more confrontational. How do you see her relationship, or how did you see it when you were in office?
Well, first of all, I fully understood the importance of Russia to Germany. It's going to become more important as Germany relies upon Russian natural gas to power her big industrial economy, which I thought was a mistake. But you know, I didn't view it as you know, a diminution of our relationship because she had to deal with Vladimir Putin. I mean, I viewed it as very practical. I mean, Putin's got big influence, and he speaks German, and I wasn't, you know, look, he's wily, and he can be pretty tough, but so can Angela. So I wasn't worried about Putin running over Angela Merkel. She can hold her own, and I'm sure she did.
Talking about Putin, talking about Russia, we have to talk about Nord Stream 2. Are you disappointed that Angela Merkel kept supporting this pipeline?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake, and I told that to Gerhard Schroeder, and I told it to Angela, you know. I think it's a mistake because, you know, the motivations of Russia can be pretty confusing, and I think the more that a nation that is not an open democracy has an economic stranglehold on a democracy, it puts people in a very difficult strategic position. And so I just never understood why this dismantling of the civilian nuclear power by both Chancellor Schroeder and Angela, and it just didn't make any sense to me. But that's the decision they made, and I guess the country's comfortable with it.
So Germany under Merkel, who supported, by the way, I'm sure our viewers know that the intervention in Iraq in 2003 did not support a bombing in Libya or any further intervention in Syria. Was that approach a mistake in your eyes?
No, I don't know. You know, I wasn't involved. I was very pleased. She was supportive of troops in Afghanistan. By the way, and one of the reasons why is because she saw the progress that could be made for young girls and women in Afghanistan. It's unbelievable how that society changed from the brutality of the Taliban. And now all of a sudden, you know, sadly, I'm afraid Afghan women and girls are going to suffer unspeakable harm.
Is it a mistake, the withdrawal?
You know, I think it is, yeah. Because I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad. And I'm sad. And Laura and I spend a lot of time with Afghan women, and they're scared. And I think about all the interpreters and people that helped, not only U.S. troops, but NATO troops. And they're just, it seems like they're just going to be left behind to be slaughtered by these very brutal people. And it breaks my heart. And I'm sure Angela, I haven't talked to her about it, but I suspect she feels the same way. After all, she was a little girl who grew up in a pretty closed society. And now I remember going to her hometown and talking to her about her childhood, and it was just so amazing to me to be talking to a woman who, as a young girl, was trapped in a closed society, and here she becomes the chancellor of a democratic, free country.
People say Germany's approach to military invention is not really honest. It's like a little bit on the one hand and on the other hand. Let's get the Americans do the dirty work and we Germans stay out of it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I mean, there was a universal outcry in Germany, it seemed like to me, even amongst conservative legislators about some of my decisions after 9/11. And it was really a reaction, it seemed to me, to any military involvement because of previous war. And I came to understand that. There's a psyche in every country, and I understood the psyche, and it didn't mean we couldn't be close friends. And so it didn't bother me that Germany sent police trainers. You know, we sent shooters, they sent police trainers. But it was a reflection of how the German people felt at the time. And that's how democracy works.
Should Angela Merkel have known better in that regard, that she comes from the place where she comes from, so that sometimes military action is needed?
No, I don't know. You know, that's just, everybody has to examine their own conscience. But again, people who are elected in democracy tend to reflect the culture, the attitudes, the history, the tradition of the country. And I just said that both she and Gerhard Schroeder reflected that. And so, you see, the key thing is the determination of alliance versus difference of opinion. And I always kept in mind the importance of U.S.-German relations for our own country, for my own country's sake. And therefore, when there were disagreements, I refused to let the disagreements or personal slights, if there were any, interrupt the larger goal. And the best thing for the United States is to be close with Germany. And I think it's the best thing for Germany to be close to the United States. I certainly hope so.
After Donald Trump entered office, Angela Merkel was called the leader of the free world. What do you make of that? And is there such thing as a leader of the free world?
I think there are influencers, people who've got influence to rally nations who share basic values: free press, free religion, the right to protest, and a country like the United States and Germany has got a little extra oomph in those relationships and those collectives of nations that share the same values because of the size of our economies and the size of our populations.
Did she navigate well?
I think so. I mean, I think so to the point where, I mean, there was a lot on her agenda, and she got reelected a lot, which I think speaks volumes about her successes. And, but you know what's interesting how history works? Both she and I not need to worry about short-term history, because we're not going to know where we stand until long after we're dead.
If you would write the history books, what would be your paragraph about Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel brought class and dignity to a very important position, and made very hard decisions, and did so, though, with what's best for Germany, and did so based upon principle. And the principle wasn't focused on her. The principle was larger principles that are important in life. And I think it would say compassionate leader, a woman who is not afraid to lead.
There is one image the world remembers of you and Angela Merkel, that's at the GA meeting in St. Petersburg when you were massaging her shoulders.
Oh, when I walked by and gave her, yeah. I wouldn't call it an extended massage. I'd call it a, yeah, I mean, she was, yeah, it's kind of a spontaneous reflection of friendship. And I'm sure people, you know, didn't know what to make of it, but it's, I didn't mind it. I thought it was kind of, I thought it was, wow. And it's kind of, I don't know, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that just happened. It certainly wasn't scripted.
Did you ever talk with her about it?
No. No, but if I need to, Angela, I'm sorry I did that and put you in the public spotlight. But on the other hand, it's a reflection of my friendship with you.
Thank you so very much indeed.
Happy to do it.